Yeah? Good? Yes. So, welcome to my talk, my second talk this week. All good? Yeah? Okay. So, official title. So, welcome to my talk. I'm the same guy as earlier this week. So, reverse engineering, malware analyst, and now Flare Mandian team, Google. And simple security should be simple, and engineering could be simpler too. And wrong identification or parsing are security risks, but file formats are a complex problem, much more than that. And that's why I'm trying to get people to make file formats better, in a better way. And also I work on SBUD, the visualizer I presented earlier this week, and I ended up adding a lot of dissection, learnings about older or weirder or file format with horrible features, even from famous companies I will see. And I learned from them, and this based on example, especially because over the years I really heard a lot that people think they already have a perfect view of what file formats are supposed to be for what they call traditions and what they think file formats are. And then I learned that, wow, their expectations are just completely wrong. And a good way to question traditions is to understand that they already really evolved compared to stuff not necessarily from the past, but some lesser known cases. And so that's the goal of today. Basically go through file format oddities and understand the impact of the design choice, and to change the perception that some people may have hardcore beliefs of something regarding how file formats should be, and in practice, in the past or now or very recently, it's quite different. So first is like all files have a format, and you can store data with a file without an actual format and just take a memory snapshot of everything in memory, right? And but nobody would ever do that, right? Maybe you've heard this company, Microsoft, and maybe you've heard this product, Office, but let's go a bit in the past. Microsoft in 84, Microsoft Word in 84, for a single file of, if you wanted just to save Hello World, 12 bytes, it would save just the whole page of memory. No parsing, no problem. No interoperability, no problems. It's just faster. And that was just a standard ages ago. So my first advice is, why using a file format? Then suddenly it could be a better idea, starting just the essential data. Unlike here, where you have parts of what was typed before or any menu or stuff you cancel, but who cared at the time? Who would look at the inside of file format? Is that a privacy risk? Well, maybe not. And, at the time, interoperability was not something obvious. So who needs specification when you just can work on your own? So basically, my first recommendation is, yes, use a file format. I hope no one was planning to do this thing, but it was the norm long ago. So maybe you've heard this format called MP3, but originally, anyone knows the original name of MP3? No one daring to? It used to be, the first encoder was L3 encoder, and because it was MPEG-2 layer 3, and the original file extension was L3. So these files are actually the original MP3, but I call them L3 from now on for this presentation, were just dumps of layer 3 bit streams. No header, no sequence of RAM. It was a pure data format. No file structure, no metadata, because, it was a great technology, but obviously not the best in terms of file format thinking. So these are 50 milliseconds of silence encoded with original L3 ink. And the structure is pretty clear, right? You can see the L3 frames headers, and these are just uncertain thing that start with FF, with bit set, and then you have to guess. And the only way that you can determine that it's a proper file, the proper data, proper data, is actually by heuristic. When you look for an FF, you just parse the frame header, then you read the parameters, and you compute the frame length, and you see if at the same frame there's another FF, and you do that for enough times, and at some point you can determine that's probably it's a MP3, and that's still how MP3 works in terms of data today, even though we did some headers for that. So, of course, it's still a problem today, because they are not sure. I mean, for example, this small file, most software, it can be generated, but VLC will not think it doesn't have enough data to be sure it's an MP3 data. It's too small, it's not so sure. I mean, it could be exactly like, we'll say JPEG, because again, identify FFs, that's also the principle of JPEG, and there could be some funny accidents, right? I wanted to see a muscular girl, and I heard industrial music instead. That's standard problem, but also it could be abused. And here it's like, hey, guess what you should do? Rename this file and say MP3 and play it. So, that could be a risk, some people upload JPEG and you get an MPAA takedown. It could lead some problems. So L3 was just a data format, not a file format, and the distinction, like, who cared at the time, So, but you'll see that there are still data format being made nowadays and still being presented as a file format. So use a header, something that provides reliable file type identification and avoid potential abuse like MPAA takedown, because some of your users uploaded JPEGs. And these two files work perfectly as JPEG as an MPEG, because any music player will just skip the JPEG header until it finds enough frames of L3 data. So MP3 didn't support any metadata. That's another problem, and you won't believe what happened next. No one wants to know what the bunch of L3 frames is about, industrial music maybe. And so people started hacking on it. And, without any proper, it was great. It's a way that became the standard. So basically someone added a footer, because everything, it was data from the scratch. And even worse, maybe, a footer with hard-coded lengths. So that couldn't be extendable. And then when they wanted to add just the track number, then it had to be a hack of a hack. And nothing hard-coded. So suddenly, it was a problem for future evolution of the format. And then people say, hey, let's try another footer, lyrics, and also another footer, and so on and so on. And now there's also this problem of constant variable bitrate. And then there was this Xing header that was actually a frame disguised to indicate information about where you would seek in the file. So it was basically MP3 is just an accumulation of hacks. A big mess of many structures, and because it started without any control, then it ended up as a total mess with in-frame stuff and many footers that you can have on top of each other. So now you can, some people started to embed it in containers, but it didn't solve the problem. So eventually someone added a proper header, but the data is still L3 frames. So, another format, and now you can have the same file, a one-frame file with 3 types of headers. The data presents several times, just because, it's an accumulation of standard on top of each other, and it's still bringing headaches today. So you may have heard of this format, and now it's a big mess, and now there's a security problem. It's the format redundancy dilemma, like which one, when data is presented two places, which one is the right one? And you cannot know, and that's a problem that's a basic security problem. So, L3 created a lot of mistakes, no easy identification, no metadata, no forward thinking, and now it's a mess. And now in 2021, there was a new format that is a very clever data compression, but there is a fixed header, there's no room for metadata. And guess what? People will want to say what this picture is about. And now what? They added, there's no place for room for metadata. Okay, you can have a marker, so you need to parse the whole file to actually find room for metadata. It's a nightmare of efficiency to scan the whole images just to index them. So you can see the problems. And this is very recent, but which means it's a good data format, it's a bad file format, and hacks will be created exactly like for MP3, because people will want to store the metadata. So, metadata is important. What were people doing in the past? Because it's very important to find your own files. Well, in the past, it turns out they put it first. But while InfoSec, we would like to. Oh, there's a slide that's missing. Sorry for that. So in a mod file formats, the files would start by the song title, which was easier to organize your data, but now it's a nightmare for scanning. Because if you have a song that starts with MZ, guess what? It will be passed as. Or ELF, you get the idea. So it's a problem for security. And now, of course, obviously put the file type first. So putting it first? Faster scanning, no seeking, basic versioning. And the top of the file is usually considered PII safe. So even if you keep track of the start of the file, it's not a risk. But on the other hand, we want to organize files much more than actually run them and open them. So it's important to have access to metadata pretty easily. So again, determine something for extensible metadata, because otherwise people will hack on your format, and then your format will temporarily live like L3 or quite or COI, and someone will end up creating something else, which may be an ugly hack or not. And a solution for that, if you have no experience with, this slide is the wrong place. That's a slide of music. Of mod music, and it did start with no magic, but with the song titles. And another solution for that is to use a container. We'll see that later. Basically, if you think all this is very complex, it's better that you do a bad file format in a good container, in a well-known container, than an actual bad format that people will hack on. I will explain that later. Another security that I mentioned as before is information duplicity. Okay, in the case of MP3 song, it's not a big deal, but in the case of Android signing key, signatures, it's a lot way worse. And the thing is, the benign one, the clean one is verified, and another one is executed. So really, for your file formats, prevent information duplicity if you can. Of course, specs aren't enough, because in theory, developers should check for different values, but in practice, they don't have this incentive to implement all those checks. And you shouldn't check for the difference in duplicated values, because if you just need to do basic metadata parsing, you only need to check for secure checks when you actually want to execute or render the file. So it's a problem, because there is no easy way to force the developers to actually implement this verification check between two actual values of the same thing. So basically, avoid the duplicity in your format. So, as I mentioned, it's very important. If you don't know what to do with the format, it can be a good shortcut. Let's put it that way. That instead you wrap your new format in existing file meta format. And Google and other companies do that. So that, for example, that's a standard Microsoft Wave audio file, but it's actually using the RIF meta format. So you see that the magic is RIF, and then there's a subformat of the actual file. And but actually other formats, much less known, use the same container. And so that's, for example, ClangD symbol index. It's using the same container. It starts the same. And the good thing is that the metadata will be stored in a similar way. So basically, you offload the problem of your new format, how to store metadata, to something that already exists. And this is something that is commonly done. For example, JPEG2 and MP4 share the same container. WebP is also using RIF. WebM and MKV are using the same container, so it's really a common practice, and it will save you hurdles, headaches, rather than fail too much. You see what I mean? It will prevent you to fail too far. The file format will have a magic. So again, what I mentioned was two very different file formats with different widespreadness, intents, but they all use the overall same known structure. So the metadata is already handled by the definition of RIF formats, and a lot of parsers already exist for the container. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel and to feel super smart about that. And again, a bad subformat is, in a good meta format, is already better than a bad format, especially for security reasons. So I'm actually not for encouraging polyglots. Here I'm giving hints to avoid polyglots in your format, so that you on your format will be not the one abused to hack something, Is it an insecurity or security conference? So another security risk and a source of headache is ossification, like when something typically moves but doesn't, and in the end it becomes fixed for everyone. So what never changes will end up being hard-coded in parsers, and that's a huge risk because people, if all files, okay, this value should be variable, but it's always the same value. So people just integrate it in their parser, and then they will introduce discrepancy between parsers that actually check the new value and actually don't. So it's a big problem. And again, even in the 90s, it was already creating compatibility problems with some values that people took for granted for good, So a very simple example from the past is that this format, the PCX, was starting with the manufacturer. The magic were not a standard thing back then, and they have a value of 10 and nobody ended up using a different value. So basically it became the magic in practice. So basically if you added a new version where you could be read by some files and not, here it's not a big security risk, but at least still it's a standard practice in the past. So I will not show the whole slide deck, because there are at least 90 extra slides. So unlike my usual traditions, I will stop there if it's okay. I mean, I can show you, but I encourage you to check the slide deck if you want more such information. But for the sanity of everyone in the room, or maybe you don't believe me, but okay. Well, let's go back, because otherwise it will take a long time to click everything. You get the idea. So, a bit unusual, I know, I'm getting old, but to save dementia, or I don't know, or, anyone wants that we go through all the slides? Oh, some, hey! Okay, statistics, go away for later. Special party tonight. Sorry for breaking my habits, but the reason for that is that I started this slide deck after the last Hack.lu in September 2019, and then I kept adding new slides, and then I reached 296 slides. And then I was, Hack.lu again, I can apply. We have a problem. Okay, anyway, I decided to change my habits of too many slides. It's only, anyway, you get the idea. Sorry for that. Or you can enjoy the rest of the slide deck. It will be public, of course. So, let's do a shorter talk for once. And, again, the whole idea of not only what you just saw, but the whole slide deck is definitely to shock all these ideas that we always done it that way, and to understand that things changed a lot. And we are still in the middle of evolution, so when you are like, we always do it that way, you're actually blocking something that is evolving anyway, and we're still improving somehow. So you get the idea. In short, but yeah, that's a summary of, so it's 170 slides in total, this slide deck, if I remember correctly. So yes, a header, a magic signature, room for data and evolution, so blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. But what I also learned is that at least if you use a container, you will save some headache. If you have no clue what you're doing, then it's a better clue than failing more and that people will hack on them, And so, now we even have time for questions. And what is? Oh yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, well, whatever. Or we can still go through a few dozens of extra slides. Yeah, there's a question there. Where? Researching for next year. Can you give us a hint? No idea, just better visualization. Oh yeah, generic hash collisions via Mitra. Maybe.
Any more questions? No, I guess file formats are not complex enough for questions.
For for once they can escape safely, so I fully understand.
Oh, we do have one.
The vengeance.
No, it will be okay, I think. So, yeah, my question is simple. If we need to pick a few file format for some usage to build a new one, which one will you recommend?
And you mean as a model?
Yes, as a model, yes.
Usually PNG is pretty good. Pretty simple to understand and evolutive and pretty sane. But yeah, you could always argue that it's not so compact because it's readable, kind of readable from a hex editor. And then you have some crazy stuff about people bit level formats, and totally unreadable and with proprietary specs. Okay, you get the idea. So yeah, PNG is a good start, I would say, which is why it's in the title.
Did I see another hand over here?
PNG.
No? Then let's say thank you to Ange. You're done for this year. Thank you.